what do you think is one of the fundamentals of Agile coaching? You can come off mute and you can say this. That there is a picture here for hint. What is one of the fundamentals to Agile? I'm not asking Agile coaching, apologies. What is one of the fundamentals to Agile?
Well, for me, it's part of business and organizational modernization.
Okay.
Yeah, because unfortunately, traditional ways of working don't work anymore. Because there's so much change happening so rapidly, we need to operate in a different way.
Okay. You need to operate in a different way. And that's Agile way. And when you think about Agile way of working, and what is the one thing that comes to your mind that's going to be very different from how you have been operating before?
I think for myself, so I work with non-technical teams and technical teams, trying to bridge that gap in large organizations. And for me, the one word that comes to mind when we're talking about fundamentals is empowerment, especially in large organizations with hierarchical structures and bureaucracies that goes on, is actually educating teams and empowering them. So for me, fundamentals of Agile or agility, whichever way you want to phrase it, is that empowerment.
That's fantastic. And there's one comment here, courage or adaptation. That's my number one, is from Maru Wan. Anyone else? Sustainability from Marcus.
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement.
I think also mindset plays a large role.
Mindset. Anything you get from the picture here itself?
Iteration. Yeah.
Experimentation.
Well, that's this is the image that you've shown is Scrum type iterations. And this is often a debate that we get into in the large organizations, is using this image and actually larger organizations end up doing a bit more of waterfall just very quickly when they show this image. So for me, that image is when you're talking to a technical team about use of Agile.
I don't think Agile is the tool. For me, Scrum process is like a tool. I don't think that's what Agile is all about. Scrum is just a means of ways of actually doing it. It's about increasing the flow, having the ability to change faster. Yet senior people in the organization to understand that they must actually build out outcomes and cascade those through the organizations and use the people closest to the issue, to the obstacles or whatever that might come across, to actually empower them. And we've had the lady Paige, it was Jenny, talking about empowerment. It's about actively listening to these people to actually help achieve the outcomes that the senior management or the senior leaders wish to achieve. And you do that by not dictatorship, but actually embracing everybody within the business.
Fantastic. That's very beautiful.
I'd like to add on what Jenny said. I've witnessed many times, I don't want to say uncomfortable because it's not accurate, but many times that Agile, for me, is a philosophy, and it comes from the ground. It comes from the troops. It comes from the practitioners, from people who felt that pain. And it's not just a set of methods. It's really a philosophy to me. I don't want to go down that road now, but my point is it clashes with the attitude from people taking decisions or have taken over management roles, which I am doing, for example. That's why I can witness that firsthand. And their philosophy there is they will take anything coming from there and squeeze it, force it into the formats and ways to view the world that they know. And that's why you get horrible things, Frankenstein, such as this double loop that you have here, turned into a fake model. And I've actually witnessed consultancies being driven and forced by their clients to sell them transformations that were called Agile transformations that had nothing to do with Agile, were not Agile in any way, and were just a bunch of sequential phases full of diagrams that are in fact sequences, like those magical loops, crazy eight loops, absolute sequences, and still everybody was forced to do it that way because that's what management thought was agile. So you can take any method like Scrum and de-agilify it to the core.
True. Totally. There are quite a lot. All of you have said that each one is so beautiful answer. This is very right. This, as soon as you see this image, it triggers a certain thing, that it triggers that it is Scrum and not quite Agile. And you have seen, especially Agile coaches, you have seen that even when with the best intentions are, sometimes it can be adapted, implemented differently and wrongly as well, right? That's why I have removed all the words around it. You can see that I have blocked all the words and then made it as a very simple, just a circle thing. To mean whatever we are trying to do, whatever we are trying to achieve, what we Agile coaches are in Agile ways of working. One of the fundamental things you try is that do something really small, and then in small increments, and get the feedback, and then go in the iterative loop so that you go for that. Isn't that what we try to get the teams and organizations and the people to do in general? Anything we try to do, right? Anything whether mindset or the empowerment or whenever we see the magical loop as well, that working is so not Agile, but if you want to do it in the right way, we want to do it, okay, let's start small and let's do it in a very small increment. Let's get it right. And then we take the feedback from the small increment that has been done and take the user's feedback and then go to the next iteration, next loop, right? And that's one of the things that very fundamentals to Agile. If you think about now, go back to like some of you have really expressed so well, even when the magic loop is there, or there's some implementations of some frameworks, some we are forced to do. Scrum can be completely de-agilified, and then it can be working completely wrong. As all the things you said, the empowerment that we want to see happening in the organization, even that may not happen, right? So those things we do not see quite a lot of that. There's even this one of the fundamental things as small increments and feedback and taking that in a loop. That's not how Agile coaching is done. We have not seen it, have we? No. Right? No. Even
Are you saying that in our Agile coaching we don't describe that we do break things into the smallest element? At the end of the day, what we're all trying to achieve is outcomes.
True. We that's what we preach, but do we do it in small increments? The Agile coaching itself, do we do it in a small increment and taking the feedback from the users and do it? So it's separating that from the product development and teams and organizations, but us, the coaches ourselves, or if you are a beneficiary, if you have seen the Agile coaching has been happening in your organization, how did you see that? Is it coming like a big bang, like a framework or whatever, or is it happening like, let's do it in a small way and then see, let's say do a small Agile change here and see the feedback and go from there.
Yeah, that's the way we do it. And I guess if John Smart was here from BVSSH, he'd be preaching the same thing, that you take the thought leaders. You don't make the managers, you take the thought leaders and get them to come back with feedback, with them to feedback to maybe the product or service teams. But it's about getting that value chain all singing. It's about getting the flow right.
Yeah. No,
Where Agile came from, which was lean practitioning, yeah, it really was about getting the flow of that value chain working very, very flowing constantly, not up and down, up and down, up and down. It's a constant flow. And then that achieve balance, yeah.
True. So what we see most often is not done that way. Most often, the Agile coaching itself is not done in a small increment and it like that. In some places, you just walk in and then there is a framework already defined, or in some cases, the organization has been in an Agile journey for some time. You be there as a coach and whatnot, right? You don't see that in the Agile coaching side. Whatever we preach, we should be practicing, but do we really practice, right? So if you move to the coaching part, what is one of the fundamental things to coaching, like discussed about what's Agile? What's one of the fundamental things about coaching part?
Same again for me. It's about empowering somebody else to develop themselves, work on an area of focus that they've identified for themselves, and using your coaching skills to enable them to do that and for themselves.
I think when we provide coaching, we actually provide three things. Quite often we need to show a level of training. You then need to show a level of coaching, then you need to show a level of mentoring. But the most important thing of all these things is actually listening. We need to listen. Coaches listen.
Listening, yeah, definitely.
But coaches also get a bad reputation when they keep acting like a psychologist, keeping asking questions and not actually helping the person by saying, there are several ways you might be able to do it. We can't say that any one is particularly right. What would be right is the one that's right for you. But how do you about trying this and working this way? So if you take the agenda shift courses that Carl, myself, and God knows how many others, a lot of it is about saying to people, can we suggest we're not going to provide you with a framework, but we are going to give you some simple tools to use on your Agile journey.
There's a difference between coaching, mentoring, and giving suggestions. Yeah. So in coaching, one of the fundamental things that is believed is that the coachee has all the answers, and that's the empowering Jenny said. The coachee has all the answers, and we look for them to realize that, and then we are there to be the guide or someone to bring that awareness in that place, right? Whereas when we do the Agile coaching, when we go in and then we are there, in many cases, like again, we need to differentiate between what should happen than what actually we have seen on the ground, what we have seen in many organizations. So if you think about what we have seen in many organizations, and what many of the coaches unconsciously are, either we unconsciously end up doing ourselves, or that's what we are go into an organization, that's what is expected from us, like get the ground running. If you are a contractor, get the ground running. If you are an experienced coach, get the ground running. What do they expect from us is that you just go in there and then be the expert, right? You are the expert now. Then you tell them that this card shouldn't move here, or the story points. When can you claim the story points? I have seen so many arguments on LinkedIn that you can only claim story points when this has happened or when that has happened. This is right or that's right, and so many things like that, right? If you are in a forum of bunch of Agile coaches, you can see it should be like this, it should be like that, and all sorts, right? So we are the experts. When we go in there and we go there, like we are the experts. We are going to tell you what to do and what not to do and kind of things.
I'm going to fundamentally disagree with you. I don't think the coachee has all the answers ever, because different organizations can operate in different ways. And what I want to do when I'm coaching people is actually get them to assess what works for them best.
That's actually coachee has the answer. What works for them best is coachee has the answer. We can debate about that. I'm also conscious of my time, right? But when we go in as experts, and I'm going to tell you that actually this empowers the person. Like what Jenny said, that it is about them having the empowerment. Them, like you said as well, Andrew. We support them, or we guide them, or whichever word is the right there. Whereas when in an agile coaching scenario, what we have seen in many organizations, it's usually not the case. Most often than not, it's not the case. So what do we do as soon as we have? So we are just very in the early part of the talk. We almost look like we have covered the title of the talk. Then what are we going to do for the rest of the talk, right? I'm going to introduce myself. I am Premalatha Bala. I used to be a rocket scientist, and then now I'm an agile coach. I've been doing this agile coaching for more than a decade now, and I am really enjoying it. And whenever people ask me that, you were a rocket scientist, why are you doing agile coaching? I love doing this. There is a different element to it. Here it's about people. And I really love those interactions and understanding people as well. But when I say I used to be a rocket scientist, and somebody asked me that, what is the transferable skill you bring from being a scientist to an agile coach? It got me thinking, and then made me wonder, first of all, made me wonder that what is the characteristics of a scientist? I thought about myself, that what was my characteristics? It was being curious. Whenever we see things like, how does this work? Will it work? Or what is it? Why is it, right? Why so? Why not the other way around? Why not that? Those kind of questions. So, like, will it work? Then what do you do when you say, will it work? You go on to experiment it and then see, is it really working or not? That's how a scientist does, right? So that's the experimentation mindset. And that's the experimentation mindset. Isn't that what we say to our product teams? That if you want to know, is this going to work or not, just go on to try it out and have that experimentation mindset, right? So all these are all the transferable skills that I bring to the agile coaching side, and that's what we preach to the people, that this is what you are supposed to have. Like, you have that experimentation mindset. Try out whether this is going to work or not, or how does this work, and why not, and all those kind of things, right? So if you take that, and if you consider that whatever we are preaching, or whatever we are saying to the teams and the product and the organizations, if we take that mindset for ourselves, and if we consider organizational agility as a product, what will be your first feature to release? What will be your first feature to release? You might say that it depends, right? Because you go and you study an organization, because how would we know what's the first one to help, or was first one to, if it is a product, what is the first feature to release? We wouldn't know, right? We will have to study, we will have to find out. And when we study the organization, and when we map the organization, it might sometimes look like this, right? This is copyrighted material from Klaus Leopold, co-founder of Flight Levels Academy. I mapped an organization's flow about 5 years ago, and it was uncanny, and it was unsurprisingly so similar. And I'm sure you have seen this as well in many other organizations. Apologies for the bad language there. But isn't that very true? When we see the organizations that in the middle there is some teams that are agile, very agile, we are super agile, and everywhere else that it's the end-to-end flow is quite different, and the overall time to market for the product is not quite there. There is no point in beating up the teams, right? There is no point in beating up the team. Improve your story point delivery, improve your cycle time, improving that by a day or so. How is that going to really matter in the entire thing? And then we all go frustrated, right? And so this is the situation we walk in. And then what's the problem we are solving here? As an agility coaches, we go in there and we are looking to see what's the problem that we are going to solve. What's the first feature to release? What's the first problem to solve? And how do we do that? What's the problem we are solving here? You can come off mute and you can say what's the problem here.
The first thing that comes to mind is actually taking it back a step. That this diagram for me is far too linear for an agile environment, and it's actually the way that I would personally draw it is actually the ecosystem that exists around this in a large organization. So those steering committees and waiting for approvals is product of an existing way of working, usually waterfall, or I personally come from a lean background myself as well, that kind of ecosystem. And then you have agile within that as a subsystem that is the bit that you're trying to define and identify the issues within. And sometimes it's not impossible. So the problem, what is the problem is an assessment hasn't really necessarily been carried out for me of the overall picture, as opposed to just this linear step by step. So I take it back a step.
Yeah, and I think
that's very valid.
You've used agenda shift stuff before, haven't you? I know Carl has, and I know Eddie has, but there's two elements to this. There's what would we look like if we were working at our optimum? And asking everybody in the organisation, from the person right at the top right down to the bottom, what in their minds what do they believe they would look like if they were optimum? And you'll have different views from different people. But sure as eggs are eggs, if we can actually say, if we worked as one team and that there was a constant flow, everybody would benefit. That constant flow and reiterations, as we've already alluded to, can only work if everybody's working in sync. And the whole idea of those flight levels, if you remember, is actually to get people to start working in sync. So everybody understand what the outcomes are to be achieved. They're communicated properly. What happened I was in an organisation yesterday, and what was so obvious was you had a crowd of senior executives that were barking instructions about what needs to be done. And they were passing that on to the middle management, who then felt totally stressed because the priorities changed on a daily basis, and it depended on who shouted loudest. At the end of the day, their view of reality was that this was the norm. This was the norm, that every day somebody else would stand up and say, my job's more important than the other one. And in my view, it was actually reducing the capability of everybody in the value chain by 40%. So this is the sort of thing here. How much the waiting time, which in a lean diagram, we'd measure the waiting time. We'd be able to see how much Muda waste there was in the whole value chain. Yeah.
Anyone else? Would anyone like to join and say something? I see many of others are on mute. Can you come off mute? And even if you look at the LinkedIn arguments or in any Agile coaches forum, if you go and then if you start seeing the discussions, and you would immediately say, oh, the business is not Agile, the teams are Agile, the management is not Agile, they are not embracing Agile, and all those kind of discussions you will come across. Again, I would like us to differentiate what should be done than what's happening and what you hear and what you see around yourself, even among Agile coaches. So what happens is that you would come across most often than not that people will start immediately saying that management is not so keen on Agile. There is that the development team or the small pocket of the organization is Agile, and that's all they care about. I have a small question here. Like, have you thought about what if let's say that's true, the management is not so keen on Agile, and then if you ask the question, so why is the management not so keen on Agile? Have you asked the question? And have you asked them? Have you asked those people? Uncannily, right? And when we start asking those questions, and when we start to understand their pain, have we thought about what their pain is? Now, if you see where we are going, where the direction we are heading is that now we are treating them as our users, right? Now we are treating them as that we want to know what their pain is. We want to know why they are not so keen. We would like to know what's happening there. So now it looks like now that we are treating them as our users. So that is what's becoming now is we are doing user research. We can go further, and then we can think about we can even have user persona, user journey mapping, value stream, and all those things that anything you do in your product development, you can try here. And what happens now, right? So what we have just done now is that we have just asked a question, why the management is not so keen on Agile, and we have started gathering some information. And the next step to do, according to Stephen Kramer on his book on how to think like a scientist, is that form a hypothesis, and then go and test that hypothesis. And share the result to everyone, right? So if you think about how exactly we do in our software development process, or in some organizations, you first do the user research and then design, and then you develop, and then you go back and do the user testing, right? In a very similar fashion, that you have got a question, and now you gather information, and then you form a hypothesis, and you need to test out the hypothesis. Why do we have to test out the hypothesis? Because we collected information and we got some answers to the questions. Because a hypothesis is at best an assumption based on some evidence. So sure, we have got evidence, like based on our user research, we just we started asking questions, we collected some information, and based on we have some information, we even analyzed, and we think that this is the correct one, this is what it is, but it still is not validated, it's not user tested. If you think from the Agile development point of view, that after development you go back and user test as well, so it is still not tested. So at this stage it is at best is an assumption with some evidence, and that's actually is a hypothesis. So if you look at a simple hypothesis, if you think about the managers, we started with the managers and say that the management is not so keen on Agile. But we collected some information. And during that collection of information, I would recommend you go really very specific and go really very for a very small specific area, and think in terms of the user segments. Some users where they embraced Agile coaching, where they embraced agility, and think in terms of what clicked for them. what inspired them, what worked for them, right? So we collect those kind of information. And you also have the other user segment where it didn't work for them. They're not quite bought into it. They're not quite embracing it. And we collect information that why not? Why didn't it happen here? What's the underlying condition here? What's the reason this is not quite happening there? So we collect those kind of information, and we form a very specific statement at first. Remember, we start small. We form a very specific statement at first, like if we had to say, let's say empowering teams. It came up quite a few times, right? When does the empowering teams happen? When does someone empowering happens? If Mark Dalgarno was to be here, who was running few workshops on what is empowerment means, the empowerment actually happens from within. It's not someone else to give the empowerment. That actually negates the concept of empowerment itself is what he would talk about, but that's a topic for a completely different day, another day. But if you just think about the empowerment itself, when does that empowerment happen? Probably based on the information collected, probably the empowerment happened whenever the product owner or the manager didn't have enough information. If you think about, if you observe closely in any organization, any manager, when they do not have much information, they will go and talk to the team. They will go and talk to the team and ask at least their input, at least their involvement at that stage. It might develop into an empowerment later, but in many organizations, even the most hated role in the Agile world, the project management role, even they will go and ask the team what's the what kind of information, what we should do. Yes, Kenny, you have a question. Sorry, Eddie. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not a question. It's just it's more of an observation. I mean, I've definitely seen and witnessed plenty of situations where managers don't know the answers, but they don't like to be seen to not know the answers, if that makes sense. So there's a bit of a psychological safety issue there sometimes as well, where and in those situations, that type of manager is very much not an empowering type of manager.
Yeah, very true. Very true. You nailed it on the head with the right kind of word there. It is about the psychological safety. It is about the psychological safety for the manager as well, because they are managing the impression. So far, the expectation from a manager is that they are supposed to know everything. So they are again managing the impressions. But if you look closely, if you observe closely, they would go and ask somebody because they don't know. They don't know, right? Again, I'm not going to go into detail into this because this statement does not necessarily have to be true. What if you go back a little bit, it is based on the information we collected, and we are assuming that this is the information we collected from that organization. If we just looked around a few managers and wherever it clicked for them, wherever they empowered the teams, we are only looking for wherever the empowerment happened, and we are looking for information. What was the underlying condition the empowerment happened? And I'm just giving an example here that the empowerment happened whenever the people didn't know enough information. We have not tested all that's when we will do the user testing later, right? So within the information we have got, we form a hypothesis, which is still an assumption, if you remember, which is still an assumption. We form a hypothesis with a statement, with simple statement that whenever the manager does not have an information, they empower people. Now our job is to test it out. Go and see that whenever it didn't happen, why not? What was the additional layer there, or what else was there, or something like that. We go around and see whenever this is not happening or whenever this is happening and try to test it out. So let's assume that this is true, and even in our user testing, 90% of the time this is becoming true. It's only the manager themselves didn't have enough psychological safety or whatever that came about, right? It is in our user testing, the information we get. So if we assume that this is true, and we are quite happy with our results at 90% confidence, and our next step is that to create that conducive environment, conducive situation, so that people can feel comfortably make this happen. Even the managers who are not quite comfortable to let go of the decision-making process, even when they are involving the teams, but if they are not comfortable to let go of the decision-making process, how best we can create that environment, conducive environment, to make it that it's all right. It's a topic again for we can explore that further. But what I am saying here is that let's assume that this is true, and then what we can do is that we can look for how to create that conducive environment, or we can look for conducive situation happening organically, and then we can be that catalyst or showing mirror or awareness, bringing the awareness and all those kind of things, and we can make it happen. And so let's assume that this has just happened. And if you assume that this has just happened, and what have we just achieved? We have just achieved releasing one feature of agility in a small way, one small increment of agility into the organization. So that we go back to our original question: is agile coaching agile, or is agile or coaching at all? But now you can see the agile coaching is agile. How about coaching? Yeah. How about coaching? Is there a coaching here? Like I was saying, that look for the conducive moment, or look for the coachee to discover their own awareness, or look for bring that comfortability for themselves, bring the awareness, be the guide, or whatever that's the area we play the role of a coach. So now it becomes coaching as well. So when we release the small increment, it is agile as well. When we are there playing the role of a coach, it becomes a coaching as well. So in that sense, it becomes agile coaching, right? Now we start to support the organization within their in the coachee-led way. Coachee has the answer. Because we are looking for where is this underlying condition, this is happening, and those kind of things. So there is another way. There are different types of hypothesis. This one is simple hypothesis, and there is the other one is called a null hypothesis, where you would think that there is no relationship at all between the two variables in here. Agile managers and agile mindset doesn't go together. They absolutely don't have any relevance, any relationship at all. And that is a null hypothesis. So you can have that null hypothesis and say that agile manners do not do agile mindset, right? Now we can prove ourselves wrong. And look for the managers who have shown a tiny amount of agile mindset. May not be the entire whole thing, but tiny amount of agile mindset. What are the underlying conditions there? What happened there? What clicked for them? And now you begin to, when you are working on this null hypothesis, either you can reject or accept the null hypothesis. When you collect the information, you will know whether to accept or reject this. If you accept it, we are saying that agile managers and agile doesn't go together. But if you reject it, if we prove ourselves wrong, then you end up with having a backlog of hypotheses. Under this underlying condition, this worked. Under these situations, they were able to let go of this kind of things. And now you have a wealth of information in front of you, a backlog of hypotheses, and which you can again go and test it out with a few more users, and begin to release into the organization. So now if you think about it, it is in an incremental feedback loop, and also coachee has the answers. We are we are bringing that awareness there, and we are acting as coaches. We are doing the role of a coach ourselves. So, but only if there is less than 5%, Jenny.
Just joking. I was doing a scientist joke just to get a laugh.
Oh, okay. yeah, true. So when we use hypothesis, what we are looking for is when X exists or when X is done, and then Y will happen. That's a simple hypothesis. That's the simple relationship that you are looking for, right? So the result can be yes or no. It's an experimentation mindset, because you because it's a hypothesis, you are testing it out, and the result can be yes, it's true. No, it's not true. So what you notice here is that we are not even failing. When we talk about let's do it and let's fail fast, let's learn from our failures, in this experimentation mindset, when you go this way, you are not even failing, because you are always in a curious learning mode. In your hypothesis mode, the answer can be yes or no. Both are equally valid. Neither of them are failures. And so you are having that, you are in that complete curious mindset, and you are continuously learning, and then all that learning is a wealth of information for you that can be used in your further should I go this way or should I go that way? I found out actually this way, maybe I will take this way. No, let me have to come back here. And it's everything is possible and everything is valid, and none of them are failures, and it is a continuous state of curious accelerated state, right? Yeah. So now if you look at it, what are we doing? We are trying out small things. We are taking user feedback, and it's a very user-led, right? So that's what we usually preach. We usually expect the organization to embrace. So let's assume that this is what we are saying. Agile coaching works better if you use the hypothesis-driven mindset and a hypothesis-driven way of doing and treating agility as a product. And let's say that this is a hypothesis, like the success rate is 80% higher when we use the hypothesis-driven approach than when it is not used. It can be true. It doesn't have to be true. How will we know? We can only test it out. We can only test it out and see whether this is true. If it is true, and that the world opens up, right? If the world really opens up, and then we can see under which underlying conditions these are all happening. And is it true across different types of organization? This particular hypothesis is true irrespective of the domain, irrespective of the organization's journey, the stage, wherever. This one, no, it's very unique here. If it is very unique here, why so? What's that makes different here? It opens up another curious question, right? And that starts our entire, what do you call it? I don't know. What do you think? You can ask me questions. You can come off mute and you can say, what do you think about trying this out, or what you heard just now?
I think, Prem, some of us, myself included, is getting a bit lost here. I understand what you're saying, that everything has a hypothesis and antithesis. You come up with another hypothesis until you get synthesis, right? I think we all understand that. Where I'm maybe not understanding is, imagine you've been brought into an organization as a coach, and they've had they failed in their transformation. And I'm not sure, but I think many of us find that we get called in after somebody's tried to do SAFE, a big bang approach, And we try and explain to them that, it's not a destiny, it's a journey, all the old dumb phrases that we use, and that what we seek to do is most probably start with a small group and demonstrate to the rest of the organisation how much more effective this team is working in an agile way than another team that might be working in a waterfall way. And we also try and prove the point maybe that, you keep hearing it said time and time again, 85% of waterfall projects don't deliver the benefits or the outcome they were supposed to set out to do. Some people would argue doing it the agile way is by doing it small bits. The reason why we don't fail so often is because it is so small, and that's good. But whether our success rate is 80% higher is still going to be debatable, and I'm not sure always measurable.
No, this is not about agile versus waterfall.
No, I appreciate that. What I'm saying is, if I'm measuring success in any instance, it can be difficult to measure.
Anything can be
define the outcome very, very clearly.
Yes, that's the point. That's the key point.
And when you cascade it down your 5 levels, at each stage you must say what is done. Yeah.
That's the key point. How do you measure is that what do you want to measure? What do you want to measure? And what is your success? So that's the key point. So that is not what we are discussing here. Anything you choose as your success, measure of success, then you measure. Again, I have to say that this is just a hypothesis. It doesn't have to be true. It may not be true, but what you can do is you can test it out. Is this true? Yeah. I'm not saying that this is true. I'm saying that this may or may not be true.
I appreciate what you
But this is a hypothesis. Yeah.
So what I find, I guess, interesting and thought-provoking is maybe how you would test this in a really scientific way, because probably that success rate is quite a big experiment, and then you've got to. So the way I kind of think about experiments is, how would you falsify this? Well, arguably you've got to try and have some failed transformations, and most people are not going to want to try and make their transformation fail with Agile. But I think that the overall point you're making, I kind of agree with. But I think it's a good thought experiment as to how we would test this.
Yeah, you are not making a failed transformation, but you would go about and test it out is where this is not working. In an organization, you would see that there are pockets that it's not working. Then you are finding out, why is this not working, and or you just if you think you create a statement that you want to prove yourself wrong, and in that process it helps you to uncover that things that are actually working.
Right. So I think that's that. So I kind of think about how do you falsify a hypothesis? You have to, and what you're trying to avoid is confirmation bias, where you see successful projects and you say, oh, that must be because it's Agile. It may be successful for other reasons.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I think, just thinking about it in this sense and having that curiosity and critical thinking is key, though. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So most often that we just go with this is what is right, and then we go and prove ourselves, and that's why you just flip it and then try to prove yourself wrong as well, and that tries to remove that confirmation bias. You always have that if it is true, and what if it's not true as well. So you try to collect both kind of information as well. It's uncovering information. Yes, Eddie.
Yep. Eddie, you got your hand up.
Yeah. So something that's coming to mind for me is when I looked at this hypothesis, it felt too big to prove, so with regards to all the stuff you've spoken about, do you ever find with this hypothesis driven approach that that you need to iterate on the hypothesis and break that down. So for instance, this felt big to me. I wouldn't know where to start. I'd struggle to kind of measure some of this stuff. So then my next instinct is, okay, let me break this down into something a bit more manageable. And then I might even have to do that a few times to get to something where I would feel comfortable being able to stand behind any level of measurement. Is that something you've got any kind of experience with so far?
Absolutely. That's totally you're spot on. That anytime, that's what we teach as well. That's what is Agile as well, that don't go big, go small. If this feels big, yes, go small. And if any time anything feels big, go small, something manageable, something measurable, and then keep building from there. Do what is comfortable. Someone else showed their hand up in the video, and then they went.
Yes, I can see Genti.
Yes. Hello, Prem. I'm interested to know, do you use any model when it comes to Agile coaching maturity to indicate, let's say, a level?
Sorry. Can you say it again? Agile coaching, what? Model.
Maturity or model in terms of referring, okay, you are at this level, so that, right, you are showing that this is a journey by itself. It's not going to be straightforward that we are going to become, at the very top. Do you use any particular model just to show kind of a path where you are and how you can progress, maybe?
I prefer to create that model co-create that with the organization, because it depends where they want to go and where they are now, and then you go from there. I do not prefer the standard or industry standard or whatever the maturity model that are available. I prefer to go from where they want to get to in terms of customer outcome or organizational outcome, and where they are now, what are the things you need in order to get there, and in achieving those kind of things, where are we now? If we start that as a starting state, and then what is the next state we are, and what do we consider we are in the next state, and what do we need to do, all those things. I prefer that as a co-creation with the organization. So in that way, it can be different for different organization and different pockets within the organization as well. It can be different as well.
Right. Okay.
If you're just starting out, a really basic grow model, if you Google grow models for just coaching in general, and many moons ago, that's how I started out, because I went from organizational coaching into the world of lean and agile coaching. And those basics of coaching models can really help if it's something that you're just starting out with. And that can be scaled in large organizations in terms of ways of working as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I see Thomas's hand just before that. There is a solution-focused coaching, is a particular technique in coaching. And in that coaching, we ask the coachee themselves that where do you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? And then the coachee, they decide that they are at 2, or they are at 3, or they are at 5, or whatever. And it is not up to us. In the coaching, in the solution-focused coaching itself, it's not up to us to decide where they are, and they decide where they are. And again, we don't ask that, okay, you are 7, then what you have that few more to reach, so what is next, or like that. But we ask that, why are you not 6? So that builds that, okay, I am doing this good, that good, that's why I'm not 6, I am actually 7. So that kind of it's a different kind of model. It is a solution-focused coaching model. That's the similar thing I am referring when I am saying that we co-create that maturity model. We ask the coachee, and then we ask the team, and then we co-create that. Where do you see yourself? Where are you now? And where do you want to go? Where we are now, kind of thing. It kind of helps. Thomas, sorry, I am taking too much of time. Thomas, do you want to ask the question?
Oh, thank you. I was hoping, could you refresh me on your original question? Was it to evaluate the statement or to reflect on what we've talked about so far and how we resonate in the context of, is Agile coaching agile?
It's when we start, the original question was that when what we see on the ground is Agile coaching, Agile, is it Agile? Is it coaching? The Agile coaching thing that's happening in the organizations, is it Agile? Are we doing in small and incremental way? And is it coaching? Is it user-led? And that was the original question.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Then,
Well, if that being the case, then what strikes me in terms of what resonates is I think a hypothesis approach perhaps is simply externalizing what a user-led coach is intuitively doing at times, where they're identifying a problem and intuitively assessing, making their own hypothesis. And so what I resonate with is externalizing that, there's ways to practice curiosity that can be structured but not constraining. And that actually is a way to embody some of the Agile values and principles in the coaching style. So I resonated with what you've described, that perhaps the hypothesis approach maybe isn't as profound, but perhaps is provoking in that it reveals whether or not we're actually using a user-led coaching process, and whether our curiosity that we're holding in our coaching space is meaningfully based on experimentation, and in turn, are we meaningfully embodying some of the Agile values? So I actually find some of the simplicity quite provoking, because it's this is one way of communicating it. It can be done in many other ways, but I think that's quite striking, actually. What am I actually doing?
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you so much for beautifully articulating it. And in that area where you mentioned that it's not it's externalizing and our practicing our curiosity, it's also user-led, because we don't have the answer. We don't know what is underlying, what is happening, and we get that information from the users. And in every interaction, we practice the role of being a coach to bring about that awareness, and to once you have got that this hypothesis is true or not, and then in releasing that agility into the organization to bring out that conducive environment so that it can happen in more than one place. When you test the hypothesis, you test with a small sample of users, but then you have to release it for the organization. So in those situations, that you look for the conducive environments and create those things. In some occasions, you bring about awareness, and you have plenty of opportunity to be there, to play the role of a coach, and to bring that user-led way of bringing that coaching happening there. It really opens up quite a lot of opportunities.
I think too, it challenges my natural tendencies to want to be an expert, or to want to operate that way. Or sometimes the consultant relationship is they just want an extra pair of hands, and I want to resist that and be more collaborative. But I think what's striking about this is no matter where we are in our own growth, this kind of mindset can be very challenging to really resist being an expert, even if you are the expert in the room. But that actually is putting something new on the table that invites people to maybe sit on the same side of the table, to look at something together, and maybe not pass on I'm the expert, and therefore you become the expert, and we create more kinds of dependencies in the organization.
Yeah.
But instead, almost with multiplication in mind, in a sense of, is there a little tiny bit of curiosity and practice and discipline, way of thinking that we can embody, model, coach. So again, to your point, agile coaching, whether it's agile or not, striking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And when you look at that book by Stephen Kramer, it is written for children. Actually, it's a children book. It's only 42 pages. It's very quick read, and it's so beautifully written that how to think like a scientist. And if you look at that, even though when you say the term scientist, we immediately think that they are experts. But it's not the case. That's not how they think about themselves, especially when they see something that is triggering their curiosity. They do not immediately assume that I'm an expert, I have an answer for this. They try to explore. And that's the mindset. That's the scientist mindset we bring in here. And it's a very quick read, only 42 pages, 20 minutes maximum, you can finish the book. And it's a very beautiful round. Actually, how Stephen Kramer refers is that you are like a detective. You are like a detective collecting clues, and then use that clues for you to reach a conclusion, to reach an answer to what's happening around there. There are 3 stories mentioned in the book. They are very beautiful ones.